Good morning from Maria01 and the Shortcuts Ask Me Anything session. As many of our viewers probably know, the Shortcut is a place for social and professional integration in Finland. We are known for our events about CVs and cover letters and discussions with tech startups, but today we decided to offer you something new, and we have asked Anders Adlercreutz, Member of Parliament of Finland, to join our Ask Me Anything session today. So the session is going to be about Finnish politics, and if you are already thinking about questions, you can put them in the chat. And if you are joining us on Facebook, please note that your question might be visible after the event to whomever can see your news feed. So that's a little bit of our housekeeping rules. We have about 30 minutes to have a conversation with Anders here. And our main focus today is to talk about Finland's development, international talent, and politics, and how politics works in Finland. Just shortly about the Shortcut, for those who are new to our services, we're owned by the Startup Foundation and have the same parent company as Maria01, Slush, Junction, and Wayventure. And we're a non-for-profit organization dedicated to helping our community find their purpose. Anders is a member of parliament, as I said, and he represents the Liberal Swedish People's Party and is the chair of the Swedish parliamentary group. Before being elected to parliament in 2015, he worked as an architect for 20 years and has both studied and worked abroad in Portugal, Spain, and Italy. So Anders, thank you so much for joining us today. To introduce yourself, could you tell us a little bit about what drives you to work in politics?
Yeah, thanks, Julia, for having me. Yes, what drives me to work in politics? As you said, and I have a previous career. I worked as an architect for 20 years. So the move into politics was quite a big step for me. I didn't really have a political background, but I could say that one driver for me entering politics was what I viewed as the changing discussion climate in Finland, how I thought that the populist movements gained terrain in Finland also. I was worried about Finland turning inwards and I mean, as like constructing mental borders around the edges of Finland and not viewing Finland as a part of the international community, not valuing international cooperation, the raising EU skepticism, general xenophobia. I think those were the main drivers that made me think that okay, maybe I should try to do my share and enter politics.
Yeah, that sounds really good and a noble cause. A lot of our audience who might be watching this either right now or to our newsletter later might be thinking about how politics works in their own countries. We, in the Shortcut, have audiences that participate from 132 different nationalities, so we have a very broad community. So can you tell us a little bit about how politics works in Finland? Like, what is the agenda of the current government? What do you think will happen to the remainder of the government period, and how are decisions actually made in the Finnish parliament? Because there are some big differences between, let's say, German and US and Finnish parliamentary systems.
Yeah, well, that's quite a wide range of questions.
Yeah.
But if I start with what might be typical for the Finnish political climate, and we have many parties. We have 9 parties in parliament, and we have a tradition of coalition governments. So it's not like in the UK or the US, for example, where you have 2 main parties, and it's either this one or the other one, and it's a very abrupt change when the government changes or the ruling party changes. So it's not a binary system, but a tradition of coalitions, which I mean, in a way, makes for fairly dull politics. I mean, it's not as binary as in many countries, but I think it in many ways is a good thing. Every party knows that even if I'm now in government, I might be in the opposition after the next election. And even if I now maybe I'm in opposition, and the driver of my politics might be, if you're crass, to criticize the ruling parties, we might form a coalition after the next election. So you can't really burn your bridges, but you have to have fairly good relations with the opposition, because the opposition might be your partner in a few years. So I think that makes for a reasonably sound political climate. It of course also means that changes are never really abrupt, and they are not fast either, which might for some be a negative thing, but I think it creates a certain stability and a certain uh, soundness to the political discussion and the political uh, climate. And I think that's that has been one of the drivers between like a fairly stable political scene and a stable progression. But even so, I mean, we have elections and we have changes, and I think this government is to some extent a reaction to the government that we had between 15 and 19, which was a government formed by the Centre Party, the Coalition Party, and the True Finns. So there was some nationalistic influences, and then a fairly like right of center political agenda. Now we have a broader coalition. I mean, my party would be considered a liberal center-right party, but we have parties ranging to the left alliance. So it's a broad coalition. And maybe compared to the last government, I think you could view it also as a liberal government, in the sense that the most conservative parties are not now in government. You could also say that it in other aspects also is a reaction to the last one. There are quite significant efforts to reform the education system. We have introduced what we call the mandatory second stage. I don't know how you'd translate it into English, but before you had to go to school to 15 years in Finland. Now it's raised to 18. That's quite a significant structural challenge. But this government, of course, is also criticized for maybe less strict view on the financial politics. So expenditure has also been raised like by 1 billion on an annual level, to give you an uncomplicated number. Yeah.
In this last budget proposal that I think you are discussing now in Parliament, there are quite some efforts put to making life easier for international talents in Finland. When do you think we might see some results coming through from this? Because I think one of the things we hear quite often from our international community is what you also referred to a little bit earlier, that international talents are quite frustrated that sometimes it takes a long time for changes to happen in Finland, for example, with the working permit changes and those kinds of things. So how does that work in practice?
Well, I mean, there's a lot of work being done around that, and as a work permit now can take, I don't know, up to 1 year. I mean, extreme cases, but several months is usually the minimum. We are trying to create a fast track that would mean that you could get your permit in 14 days in many cases. No, I mean, in Finland, I think we have this false view that the whole world is running to come to Finland, whereas we Finns rather should really try to lure people here. It's not in every way a tantalizing proposal. I mean, Finland as as a working environment. So we really have to make an effort to get people to come here, and we need people from abroad. But somehow our system is now more geared towards finding problems and finding ways of not letting people in instead of luring people here. And this is like one change on a mental level that we are trying to push through in government. And this is one way where this, or one area of politics where this government quite radically differs from the previous one. But I mentioned this 14 day thing. That is one thing. We are introducing a D visa, which would mean that you could, I mean, that would make for an easier process. Yeah, so those are maybe the two main things. Then our party also would hope that we would get rid of what's called saatavuusharkinta, which means that in certain areas, before you can come to Finland to work, there's this process in Finland where you go through just about everything there is to see if there's somebody that could be more suitable than this person, and that makes for adding quite a few months to the process in general. But that's not on this government's agenda, but maybe it will be on the next ones.
Yeah, for sure. And there is actually a comment in the chat about the brain drain, and I think
yes.
That's probably something that this government is also quite focused on. And from the shortcut, we see the brain drain, of course, to being native Finn, Swedish, and Finnish speaking, but also the international talents who come here and then find it quite hard to be. And there are quite some things. I think most people who work in politics know what some of the steps are. But for example, the bank ID is one blocker, and the whole thing of feeling included in society.
Yes.
And is that something where you can affect through political change, or how do you think we can make Finland a more welcoming?
Yeah, I mean, this is a very important question. I think, I mean, the idea, for example, that somebody could come here to study and graduate from a university and then would be allowed to go, or would be somehow incentivized to go, is just like incredibly stupid. We should do everything we can to keep those that have studied in Finland here and try to get them into work and integrated into society and somehow to build their own life here. No, I think, I mean, the general mentality in society is not optimal, and I think we politicians can do a lot to change the perception, to somehow change the narrative so that everybody that comes here would see as a boon to society instead of something that in certain fields of politics is viewed as a negative thing. And I think that the general climate, I mean, towards foreigners is one of the drivers that push people out of Finland instead of keeping them here. For example, you mentioned Swedish-speaking Finns, and my mother tongue is Swedish. And for example, in some areas, people almost rather move to Stockholm than move to Helsinki. I mean, the view that also that the general climate towards the bilinguality of Finland is something that is in decline, and some people view that being a Swedish-speaking Finn, you have a hard time feeling at home here, and therefore look towards Sweden or even the other Nordic countries. So I think, I mean, the general attitude needs to change. But it's for many reasons it's quite difficult for a foreigner to find work in Finland. I think one thing is how the binary attitude towards language. I mean, either you speak perfect Finnish, or then you're not allowed to speak Finnish at all. And again, if you look at Sweden, in public life, you see various levels of Swedish spoken, whereas in Finland, it's like almost like speak perfectly Finnish or be quiet, or Swedish for that matter. So somehow I think we should relax our attitude towards communication and language, and allow for like different ways of communication in public life and at the workplace.
Do you personally believe in facts like, some people mentioned that you can have these financial incentives, like if you hire someone who doesn't speak perfect Finnish, and then you can get some tax benefits or other. Do you think that those work, or is it more of the general mindset change?
No, I think the tax benefits can be a way for people to get into Finnish society, so that the threshold for hiring somebody would be lower. But in general, you can say that, of course, if you see more people like with a foreign background at your work, then okay, of course your attitude might change also. But I think the biggest thing is the general attitude, and as always, those that those that somehow feel that that immigration is a threat to Finnish society, the general, like the immigrants they know, but they are scared of those that they have heard of, or something like that. So in that sense, I also think that the just increased interaction will be benefit on so many levels, also for people to get rid of their preconceptions.
We have a question here in the chat about what concrete milestones we can look forward to Finland reaching legislation within the 12 to 24 months. Do you want to
Yes,
open?
I think two concrete milestones is the application of this D visa that would make processes easier, and the practical application of this 14-day process for work-related visas. I really hope that we could pass those pieces of legislation. But another thing that is also discussed is, you talk a lot about using public resources in better ways, and now we push everybody through the same process, even though we have companies like Nokia that hire, I don't know, 100 people from abroad every year, and everybody, all of those hirings have to go through this tedious process. If a company has a clean track record, fulfills its duties, pays decent wages, there's no reason why that company, for also the 101st hiring, should have to go through this process. After a certain number of good cases and processes done according to all the rules and so on, they should be able to move over to a fast track where they just hire until some problem occurs, and then you might rethink again. But everybody doesn't need to go through this tedious process that we have in place
We've also
at the moment.
At the shortcut discussing this, that if you are employed in Finland and you have been living, let's say, 10 years in Finland, and your children are Finnish, might there not also be an opportunity to have a fast track for those talents, so that those people who have gone through the same, yes, actually we have a question about that in the chat as well, but the people who have already gone through the process a couple of times could have a shorter processing if nothing has changed and they've already passed the background checks a couple of times. It seems,
yes,
at least from an outsider, that it's quite a waste of resources as well to have the same long processing with the mental burden that it can take to wait for your permit.
Yes, and as Christina now in the chat says, that the whole process of renewing your permit it's absurd at present, and in some cases you're not allowed to move out of the country while the process is taking place, which means that, of course, if you're here working in a field where you're required to travel, it really inhibits your work. So and many of these things aren't even laws. It's just like bad practice that have somehow been rooted in the system and that people just don't get rid of. So of course, as a politician, I shouldn't put blame on anything else. The buck stops here at the end, but somehow the culture in Migri isn't sound. I think there is this culture of looking for problems where problems don't exist, and and closing opportunities where you should open them really. And I think, I mean, there's a lot to be done.
Yeah. And I think you were right on the money in the beginning when you were speaking about, excuse me, Finland sort of pushing people away in this global competitive market. And we did a panel in June with this Reform Migri grassroots movement. And the participants, we had about 200 suggestions on how to improve Migri. And a lot of it was just people reacting to how this process was very unpleasant for them as individuals. And of course, there were also improvements mentioned on automation that Migri is now tackling to some extent. But I think a big portion that we never go through as Finns is the sort of negative tone that can be in the application process. And also Migri has a lot of resources on their website, but it's not very easy to find them. So if you have to travel home to visit sick parents or family, that's available to you if you know to apply for it. So
yes, and I mean the whole idea. I mean, I haven't been through a Migri process, but from what I've heard, it's I mean, the approach is more the approach you have towards a criminal than towards a guest and an opportunity and somebody that you want to welcome to Finland. If I tell you a personal case of my family, we had a Colombian exchange student in our house a few years ago. I mean, a really gifted guy. I mean, a member of the Colombian mathematics Olympics team who had graduated 2 years before his class, among the really top students in his country, and as a result he got a full scholarship to worth $100,000 to a university in Colombia. But while waiting to accept that one, he came to Finland for 1 year and lived in our house and learned Swedish and went to a Swedish speaking school and did really well. And during that year, he thought that, okay, as his goals is to do like really well in the physics department, and I mean, he had his goals set really high on the scientific level. He thought, okay, so maybe he would like to study in the Nordic countries. He thought that would give him like a better entry into the scientific world. And so we went to the Helsinki University, and the faculty of physics was really excited about him because he was, I mean, he's incredibly gifted. And they said that, of course, I mean, he can't enter the normal bachelor's program because they don't have a bachelor's program in English, but he could enter the open university program. And after a few months of proving himself, he could, like, through the back door enter the regular program, and that would be a way for them to give him entry into the Finnish university system. But this Migri wouldn't take this. They said that they can't give a residency permit for even a few months for somebody studying at the open university. So it was a no-go. Then I contacted Lund University in Sweden, and they offered him a place. So he went to Lund, studied there for a few years with amazing grades, then continued to Munich, where he's doing his master's at present, while developing quantum computers for IBM. So this is the guy that Finland lost just because Migri doesn't see the opportunities they are facing and the opportunities that guys like Santiago in this case would offer Finland. So we're losing all these talents by just being stupid.
Yeah, and that actually ties well into Christina's question. So what can we do who are not politicians to help you move change forward? And I guess that goes also, for us that can vote, but for those who are international talent and haven't yet the right to vote in Finland, is there also something how they can help liberal politicians such as yourself move change?
Well, I think, I mean, this is a good venue, me hearing from your experiences and in that way, like, really helping my work in a concrete way. But I think, I mean, all the stories of things gone wrong, and I mean all the problems that I mean I don't face them in my life, so I only know about them when I hear about them from you, and I think the Shortcut does a really good job in moving these things forward. Um, yes, I mean I think that I mean people, even if people are skeptical towards immigration in general, I think, I mean, people are reasonable beings, and I think people recognize unreasonable uh, things when they are told about them. So I think all these stories that you can tell me are important. I mean, I've talked with Christina previously, and she taught me a lot too. So I think, I mean, all these concrete cases that somehow shed light on the absurdities in our present system are useful. Um, yes.
That's
So,
really good, and we do have a lot of stories, as we annually have around 2,000 people who pass through our services and join our lab. So also you in the audience, if you want to share something with us, we're very happy to bring those messages forward to decision makers as well, such as Anders and his colleagues. And of course, we are founded in the startup system, and we see a lot of things that Kirsi is also highlighting here in the chat. And of course, the work permits we've already discussed have some issues on the startup side as well. But this is a great comment from Kirsi here, that it's because a lot of the time people or international talents find it easier to start a company here than finding traditional employment, and
yes.
that's something that we want to support, of course, but it should equally also be possible to find a job.
Yes, yeah, and that's one of the problems with Finnish work life, that it's somehow so binary. We have a hard time seeing that I mean, perfect Finnish and Swedish isn't like the only thing that defines how we can work in a Finnish work environment. But I think, I mean, that the point about startups in general, Katarina Fake, her story was written about in Helsingin Sanomat, I don't know what, half a year ago or so. And I think that's just a perfect example of how our system doesn't see different kinds of employments and different kinds of entrepreneurship and different businesses as equal. I mean, her form of employment didn't, I mean, you couldn't tick it into some of the MIGRI boxes. So through that, she couldn't get a work permit. And that was, I mean, a huge loss for
we've also
Finnish
heard
society.
Of some startups who've only part of the team have gotten permits to work in Finland, and the other part has to stay in their origin country. And then again, the bottom line is that Finland loses out on these people who could fortify our economy as well. So
yes.
So hopefully we will see some changes. We have 2 minutes left, so I don't know, Anders, do you want to tell us what are you looking forward to working on this fall? Is there something other that you want to highlight apart from the work permits before we round up?
Well, I mean, the 1.5 years that we have behind us have been really, really strange. So if I just look subjectively on my work, I think it's just fantastic that people are seeing each other again. I mean, it's been some quite boring 18 months here in Parliament, where people aren't seeing each other around the tables in the cafeteria. There was like one chair at each table, which is just very, very sad. Having people in the plenary hall again, I mean, discussing for real, just makes life nicer, if not always easier, but nicer, and I think that is really, really a good thing. This whole COVID situation also means that Finland has, I mean, we have a lot of backlog in legislation, which will come which will flood the system in the coming months. So we'll have a lot of work. But I mean, if you look at this government, many of the reforms have been done already, but I think those specifically that we have talked about here, the reforms around immigration haven't. So and when you have 1.5 years until the next election, time is almost running out, and that is of course of some concern because I believe that this is for these matters, this is the best government base that you can have because those parties that are or the main party that is skeptical towards immigration is not inside government. So I mean, we don't have much time, and the things that we can do should be done because things might not turn for the better after the next election, depending on how it goes, of course. But we also have other economic issues that we need to focus on, and employment being maybe the big one, and of course these things that we have discussed here are really they play a big part in that discussion. I mean, getting the problem that most companies talk about. I mean, number one of many companies' list is the lack of labor, lack of qualified labor, and the problems in these processes. So I really hope that we can focus on it, and I would say that we have a one year window of opportunity before everybody gets their head towards the elections. So there's no time to be lost here.
I very much agree with you there, and we are also running out of time. We're actually 2 minutes over time. So I want to thank you, Anders, for joining us today. And there is also a nice question from Camilla Sultanova from Inclusive in the chat, commenting on this situation that we can have a look at afterwards. And as always, we're really excited to hear from you and talk to you also about what our community is feeling. So thank you for giving us this time today, and keep up working for integration and inclusion in Finland. Thank you from the Shortcut.
Yeah, thank you, Julia. I really enjoyed starting my day here with you. This was an inspiring discussion on a topic I really feel is important.
Yes, thank you. So goodbye to you all, and we'll see you again in the next Ask Me Anything. And we also have a career resilience discussion next week that you can tune into. So have a great week and day, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.